everyone. I'm Megan with the I Believe podcast, and today we have a lovely guest with us.
Hi, my name is Vitote from Lean on Ayurveda, and this is the second time that I am on this podcast. The first time we discussed sleep in the process of healing, the importance of sleep, and this time we're discussing digestion. Yay!
That is such a great topic. So I loved our conversation last time on sleep and the role of recovery. So I'm excited to dive into digestion. Why do we need to pay attention to digestion in the first place? What does it do and how is it going to affect us?
Digestion, just sleep, are these pillars on which our overall health and well-being stand in a way. Right? It's the main things that support us. With our intake of food, this is one of the ways in which we get our life force, the force that we need to live, right? So the most direct way in which we get that life force is by breathing, right? So we breathe in, we get the oxygen that we need. And through food, we get it in a more indirect way because there is the whole process of turning food into nutrients in the form that we can use it. It's lengthier, right? So that's why it's indirect. But nevertheless, breath and food are ways in which we get the energy we need to live, right? So when we're talking about digestion, and especially digestion in the context of recovery or healing, in the healing process, and we're talking about this life force that we need to heal and to repair our body, right? Two things we can think about. So if our food is void of life force, so for instance, if we're eating a lot of packaged stuff, really hyper processed foods, which happen often in our society nowadays, that food can be poor quality and not give us the energy that we need, the quality of the life force that we need and that our body can use. But we might also be eating in a way that we think is super healthy and organic and fresh, but we might not be digesting that healthy food, which is not helpful either, right? So it's these two things that we can think about when we're trying to evaluate our digestion, is the quality of the food that we eat, and also whether what we eat we can actually process and digest, right? And so the more is going on with our body, especially in circumstances where we are recovering from an illness or our body is repairing, that is when we will want to pay even more attention to our digestion, because that life in Eastern thought, there are different terms to describe that life force. In Ayurveda, we talk about prana. In Chinese medicine, they have another term for it. It's called qi. When we are healing, we need even more of that energy. So that is why when we're healing, we want to pay special attention to our digestion, because we want to make sure that we are really optimizing, we're getting the optimal nutrition that our body can use and repair, right? And so very often when I work with people, sometimes people, they will say, I have always been bloated, or I have always been constipated, for 10 years. It's these very common digestive symptoms that we think of as benign, but they are actually indicators that we are not using, we're not able to use what we consume. There's something that is off in the digestive process, right? So that is our body's way of telling us, hey, either the food you're eating is not great, or the way you're eating your food is not great, right? And we're not able to use what you're eating.
That makes so much sense. So what would you recommend is a beneficial diet? What should people be eating?
That would really depend on a person. Ayurveda is bio-individual, so it will look at the person's body type and also what they're going through right now. However, there are some general guidelines that I can say would work for everyone, right? So the first advice is eat more at home, eat more home-cooked food. The more you eat at home, the healthier you will be. That's a general rule for everyone. And that's because when we make our own food, we know exactly what's in it, right? We know the ingredients. We know the freshness of the ingredients. We know where they come from. We know the oils that we use, because most of the time restaurants, they will use the cheaper oils that can get rancid, and those are really harmful. So that's the first thing. We know what is in that food. We also know in what energy the food was prepared. So energetics of food is another thing that Ayurveda looks at. There's a difference in eating a meal that has been prepared in a loving way and in a very stressful environment, which most restaurant kitchens actually are. I have a family member who is a chef, and I know how much stress she experiences at work. It's not a happy place to be most of the time. I guess, that will depend. But as a general rule, restaurant kitchens, stressful places.
Such an interesting take. I have never heard anybody talk about the energy that you prepare your food with, but it makes sense because we've always heard this was made with love, grandma made it with love. So that is actually kind of fascinating.
It's definitely, an angle that I think puts Ayurveda apart from the nutrition sciences, which might be more focused on the substance of what you're eating, but they focus less on how you're eating it. How do you feel when you sit down to have your meal? Do you even stop to check in with yourself when you sit down to eat your meal, right? Are you sitting down and you're only eating, or are you also doing other things while you're eating? Are you scrolling, or are you watching the news and getting stressed out about this or that? So the energetics of food is something that I think more and more people realize that it can make a difference.
That's so interesting. I love that.
We were talking about cooking at home, right? Another thing is when we eat at home, I think we're much more to stick to our portions, right? Because there's less FOMO. There's less, I paid for this. Have you ever observed people at an all-you-can-eat buffet?
Yes.
We wouldn't do that at home, right? But there's this, I paid $20 for my breakfast, so I need to get my money back,
Eat your money's worth.
I think it's a very human thing to do. But if we do this on a more regular basis, people who travel a lot and they do have this type of breakfast very often, or, if you have an all-you-can-eat buffet lunch near your office and you go there often, just observing yourself, what are you eating with your eyes, or can you be discerning about what is appropriate, how much food is appropriate for you? It's very easy to measure how much food our body can process. There's physiological ways to measure. So first, you can put your hands together, cup your hands together, this. And what fits in here is pretty much your portion, right?
That makes sense. Because when you have a toddler, they tell you the size of their fist is the size of their stomach. So when they graze all day, that's why you can't make them sit down and eat a big meal. It's the size of their fist. So that makes sense.
And then another thing that you can watch out for, this is really interesting because this often comes as a surprise to people, and I can assure that it really happens. So when we chew our food and it goes into our stomach, when our stomach reaches its capacity, it will let us know by emitting a gentle passage of air, which is a very silent and discreet burp, which most people don't notice. But if you chew your food slowly, you'll be able to notice. Your stomach will do that when it's at capacity. At capacity doesn't mean it's full. It needs to leave some space, right, for some liquid and for also a little bit of air. Just a washing machine, you would never stuff it to its full capacity because it would not wash the clothes well, right? So our stomach is the same. We need to leave some empty space for digestion to happen, right?
That makes sense.
So our stomachs can tell us that they're full by, showing us this very silent burp. And once you hear that, you can just put your muscles down.
That's so
It's a
interesting.
challenge to explore, Most
Yeah.
people who hear this for the first time, they say that doesn't happen to them, but that's just because, we don't have that awareness. But
Yeah.
when I work with clients, most of the time people start to notice it. It's an interesting angle to explore. And also it forces you to eat more mindfully, right? Because you're looking for it. So you're chewing better, right? You're chewing your food until it's liquid. And also you slow down a little. So we're more able to feel when we're satiated as well, when we eat slowly.
So that's a great challenge for everyone watching or listening is eat a little bit slower, chew your food more thoroughly, and see if you can realize when that air comes. It's a great challenge.
It's super discreet. It's not, other people will not be able to hear it. It's just a very discreet passage of air from your stomach.
Interesting. So what about fasting? How does that play in? Do you recommend that or not?
From the Ayurvedic lens, I definitely cannot recommend it for everyone as a general rule, especially for healing, because there are some people for which this is not at all appropriate. For some, it can be. As a general guideline for good digestion, what I can say is that if we respect the natural daily rhythm, so eating at regular times every day, and respecting the portion size, right? We will go a long way. And if we stick to that daily rhythm, so our digestion capacity follows the rhythm of the sun. So as the sun is highest in the sky at midday, that is when we can metabolize the most. We have the most digestive capacity according to Ayurveda. So if you can plan to have the most nutritious and the heaviest meal of the day at lunch, breakfast can be lighter, and dinner also should be lighter, because just as the sun sets in the evening, our capacity is also to digest food also reduces in the evening. And this is very easy to observe firsthand. If you ever were to have a heavy dinner at night, you will not digest it in the same. So for most people, when they follow a daily rhythm, in a way that is regular, give or take, maybe having 1 hour of margin because life happens, they will go, that will take them a long way to having better digestion for sure.
So regular meal times.
And also, if you think about it, if you have a lighter dinner at 5 or 6, and then you have breakfast at 8, you already have a very good window where you're not eating, right? So it's not fasting, but it's enough of a window for your digestive system to rest, right?
That sounds good.
What Ayurveda does advise for most people is seasonal mono diet. So during the seasonal juncture, so now we're coming up to fall in the Northern Hemisphere. So in Ayurvedic traditions, usually there will be a fall cleanse and also a spring cleanse. These experiences, they're not really fasting experiences, but they're mono diet experiences. So it means that first we go about removing, items that are in general unhelpful, such as, refined sugar, caffeine, alcohol during this time. And then we lead our body into a mono diet where we eat a very easily digestible but a nutritious meal for 3 days in a row, for example, because and we would have this very strict rhythm of eating it 3 times, the same thing 3 times per day for 3 days. The reason why Ayurveda uses a mono diet is because having a regular intake at the same time really helps our body feel safe. It's receiving nutrients on a regular basis. So it kind of doesn't need to think about it. What, is food coming? Is it not coming? And then also it's the same food. So it tends to be the Ayurvedic mono diet tends to be the mung bean, which is the most easily digestible, that has the most nutrients. So it has this ratio of digestibility and nutrients that is very high. And then usually it will be rice, white rice, and vegetables. So we will be eating that for 3 days in a row. And that allows our body to reset, for the digestive apparatus to reset, because it's receiving a regular meal that is very easily processed, and it's the same kind of meal that is coming. So it doesn't need to think about, how do I digest this? How do I digest this? It's the same thing. So our body's, okay, I know how to deal with this. I'm just doing it on autopilot.
Smart.
So that's an Ayurvedic practice that happens twice a year. And then we come out of it, adding slowly, going back into our regular diet.
Awesome. I actually do enjoy doing a cleanse from time to time because I do think it kind of gives you that reset.
I'll be planning one next month, so you can join.
Awesome. Well, I'd love to hear how it goes. That's fantastic. So, a question. What are the most impactful shifts that you can make to minimize digestive comfort? Any insight on that?
So we already spoke about eating at home as many of your meals as you can. So if you're, I know many people don't enjoy cooking, and many people haven't cooked for themselves in forever, right? That is an issue. So I think that is probably the most impactful shift that someone can make, to start exploring the process of cooking and asking themselves, what would it take for me to enjoy this, right? How can I make this an enjoyable part of my life, right? And there you can get creative. Would it help if you get some new cookware? Would it help if you put the music on? Can you put some fresh flowers in your kitchen that light you up? I think really looking at, am I cooking at home? If I'm not cooking at home, why? Is it just the time, or is it because I'm not used to it? Is it because I don't enjoy it? Right? And really, really getting creative with that. Also looking at, that's part of the process, looking at your pantry. What's in your pantry? What's available for you when you walk into your kitchen and you want to make a meal? How do you set yourself up for success when you need to make something relatively quickly if you're hungry? What is available out there? Because that's often a problem for people. If we don't prepare in advance and then we walk into the kitchen, there's nothing I can put together from what I have. And so there we end up calling Uber Eats or whatever. Also checking your kitchen and looking at, what do I have on hand? And can you have a list of 2 meals that you could make in 5 minutes, if you're really hungry? Do you have eggs in the fridge? If you eat eggs, can you make an omelet really quickly? Yep. That's already a good meal. It's real food.
Definitely. Yep.
Better than getting takeout. Sure.
Absolutely.
And so then we also spoke about respecting those hours, right?
Yes.
That's really, really important for the body to know that it's going to be receiving nourishment at the same time, more or less, every day.
That's perfect.
Yeah, that's also a big one.
Any other ones besides schedule and eating at home?
When it comes to advice on specific diets, this advice will differ. For some people, some bodies will need more fats in their diet, for example. These will be bodies that will have inherently a lot of dryness in them. So dryness in the body can express itself as constipation, can express itself as dry skin, cracking joints, brittle hair, brittle nails, but also a very anxious mind. That's also an expression of dryness. So there are some body types that will need a more, they will need their meals to be warm, unctuous, and more fatty, right, in nature, more rich, more grounding. There's some body types that would get recommendations for a more cooling diet. So these are bodies that are prone to inflammation, prone to anger, prone to all sorts of skin issues, rashes, acne, eczema. So these are typically bodies that have too much fire in them, right? So these are all symptoms in Ayurveda that are associated with too much heat in the body. So in those cases, always regular meal times, that's for everyone. But in those cases, there will be an emphasis on green vegetables, bitter vegetables, because green vegetables, they are very cooling in nature. what is bitter, the bitter taste in our food is cooling for the blood.
Wow.
And so, things, drinking celery juice, for example, that can be really beneficial for a person who has, for instance, liver issues, which is to do with excess fire in the body. So basically eating, a lot of green things. And those people can also do better with raw food, which, for example, a person who has a drier and colder body will not be able to digest, right? They will make them bloated. So these are examples. Then there are other bodies who are heavier in nature. These are people who are a bit slower in nature. They have to move less. So for them, again, dietary recommendations will be, again, different. So that's why, when we give specific advice, it's always personalized when it comes to the diet, for sure.
And that's so important. We all are so different and our body types are different. And I think even as we age, we change.
And there are different stages of life. Our children, when we have small kids, we want them to have more of the, fatty foods as well, because they're building tissue, right? And then as we age, we might need a little bit less of that, right? So it absolutely depends. It depends what our body constitution needs, but also depends what is happening with us right now. What are the circumstances? Are we really stressed out right now? Whenever I talk about diet and digestion, I always to quote Dr. Claudia Welch, who beautifully said, the more complicated your life, the simpler your diet should be. And I love that because there's so much in that sentence.
Yes, it makes sense. That one does hit home for me too. And I definitely can say that when my kids were younger and I was home with them not really doing a lot, I did get very creative in the kitchen and I did complicated recipes and it was fun. And now that we're all much busier, our diets have gotten a lot simpler. There's a lot more meals that it's here's your protein, here's your starch, here's your vegetable, because it's easy to throw together. You can pull stuff out of the fridge. They don't necessarily have to have a bunch of ingredients.
And I think actually the sentence, it beautifully illustrates that in Ayurveda, the process of digestion, the process of digesting food is also linked to our ability to digest life, as I say.
That makes sense.
So this comes from, here we are talking of concepts. So in Ayurveda, there's this concept of fire that our ancestors worked with, and they were looking for patterns. And working with this concept of fire, they noticed this parallel because it's our digestive fire in Ayurveda that helps us digest the food that we eat. But there is also the same principle of fire. It will just, be on a subtle level that allows us to perceive and to turn what we take in with our senses into an integrated experience. So that is a very similar process. As we take food and we turn it into nutrients, we also take in life, and we turn it into our experience. And so what the ancient texts talk about is that those two processes, since they're governed by the same principle of fire, they are very related. So what that means is if our digestion is working well, the way we experience our life will also be, clearer and easier. When our digestive process starts to block up somewhere, this will also translate as blockages somewhere along the line in the way we experience life. So, we can talk about very, very simple and relatable examples that I'm sure all of us have experienced. So, for instance, let's take Christmas, right? Because that's always a big one. At Christmas, many people overeat, right? It's just the nature of things, right? So we might go visiting family and we have to sit at the table for a very long time and we eat way more than we can. And we sit some more and we drink some more. And then by third or fourth day or however many days we celebrate, we just feel really lethargic, right? And we can't, if I think of myself going through that experience years ago, I it would be really difficult for me to imagine engaging in some sort of endeavor where sharp intellect would be required after this experience, because of the way that one would feel after having exposed themselves to heavy digestion over a period of several days. We would feel sitting on the sofa, maybe eating some more chocolates and watching Christmas movies. That's what we would feel. It attracts and opposites create balance. This is always what we come back to in Ayurveda, right? And it works the other way around too. So sometimes, our experience of life can also influence our ability to digest. So it also works this way. So, for example, if we have a difficult emotion that we have trouble, assimilating and processing, right? So that is an example of an impaired digestive process, right, on the emotional level. This can absolutely influence our ability to digest food, right? It can alter our appetite. It can either make us, super hungry and we overeat, we go down the route of emotional eating, or the opposite. We might not feel hungry when we're, depressed or stressed or whatever. So it can absolutely work both ways.
Definitely. And I think a lot of people, when they get stressed, do have digestive issues when they do try to eat. And it is definitely linked. That's great to know.
So that's another reason for people to pay attention if they have been experiencing digestive discomfort, which we think of as common and normal, but it's actually not normal. It shouldn't be there. Benign things, and I'm using air quotes here, getting gas, constantly being gassy, or, not being able to eliminate every day. That's not, if we're eating every day, we should be eliminating every day. Heartburn. And so these are examples of digestive discomfort that people tend to conform with. But in fact, there is no reason why one should. Because when we address them, then our experience of life also improves, because it's the same process, just, different levels.
Oh, absolutely. And then, once you start doing that and you feel so much better, you'll think, why did I ever do that? Oh, well, thank you so much for coming on again and talking to us about food and digestion and healing and how it all works together. And tell people where they can find you.
Sure. So the best place to find me is on my website, which is leanonayurveda.com. And on Instagram also, I'm sometimes more active than others, but it's the same handle, Lean on Ayurveda.
Fantastic. Yeah. And if someone wants to work with you and find out what their body type is and what they should be eating, are you taking clients right now?
So through my website, they can book a free initial call where we can discuss all of that. And I'll also be organizing a seasonal cleanse, which will be the Ayurvedic mono diet. And we'll be doing that as a group. That will be end of September, beginning of October. So if you are interested in that experience, feel free to contact me and I'll tell you more about it.
That sounds fantastic. Well, thank you so much. We do appreciate your time. And to everyone who's watching, thank you for tuning in. It means so much to us. We can't do this without you. So your support means everything. Please subscribe and comment and do all the things. You can find us on all of our socials and on our website, acureinsight.org. We have a Tuesday night Zoom meeting for anyone who's interested in connecting with other OM patients. Our patient meeting is coming up October. It's the weekend of the 17th, 18th, 19th, that one of the couple of those days in there. I believe it's the 18th and 19th. So that's going to be in Scottsdale. If you want to come meet people in person, I'll be there. Those are always a lot of fun. And we've got some 5Ks coming up. September 28th, there's one in Santa Monica. And if you want to find the full list of all of them, go to lookingforacure.org. And there's a newsletter. You can sign up on the website. Just please follow us, find us, and keep tuning in. And we will see you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.